Hey everybody, so right now, as we are watching this video, most of your peers who are in either live CC, they're in their breakout rooms and they're beginning to dive in and kind of begin to uncover some review over Unit 3. Unit 3 has been, hopefully for you, an amazing unit, really diving into cultural diversity and seeing how honestly we are moving forward, which is amazing, but at what cost? And that's kind of where this unit is ultimately coming from. But as we moved in the unit, we have to keep in mind the foundations of what we're discussing, cultural diversity. So what is culture? Culture, if you remember, is shared. It's something that is kind of communal around a group of people. Culture is learned. It's a process of learning one's culture, so you can kind of engulf yourself into a culture. I always use a simple example as if you've ever gone to a new school. You enter into a culture of whatever school you are in. It can be learned. So you can learn what are those types of people, where do you fit in? So where would be your group? And then you can learn. Culture is also cumulative. Culture changes and adopts new practices over time. Culture diffuses, it spreads. Culture is also super diverse, and culture is integrated in ultimately our very being. If you think about who you are, what is your culture? What do you do? The culture that you engulf yourself in. For me, I love running. So part of my culture is intertwining myself into a running community, a running culture. Now, within running, I also love to learn more about runners. Runners are very diverse within themselves. You have sprinters, you have distance, you have mid distance. We're also diverse. There are people running all around the country. And they're also uniquely cumulative in the fact that we can adapt and change. I could easily go on about that because it is a very desired culture. But culture is also sometimes not a hobby, but who you are. So as you dove into Unit 3, we've talked a lot about just what is culture. And in the breakout room, here's a picture of kind of what they're looking into. They're defining the aspects of culture. Well, culture in itself, by definition, is custom, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, a people group, or a social group. So the term culture can kind of be in, who you are. It can be the religion you're in, or it can be your hobby. Culture is a very diverse word in itself. So by defining that it really opens up, when you say culture, to being a massive term. So why in that massive terms do we have conflict? Well, part is we are different. Especially as we've dove into Unit 3, you see the Western world and the Eastern world is oftentimes, as it's known, the Asian population. And even in Unit 3.03, we discussed the conflict, or the two differences between the Muslim world and the Western world. And what we began to see is how are these groups of people not only living together in many areas, but what are their conflicts? How are these arising? And why would conflicts arise? Well, if you keep in mind, oftentimes we are emotionally driven sometimes. Maybe it's the simple fact of judgment based on a simple appearance. Or in Unit 3.03, there was a quote, "Many people think Islam is not relevant in modern world, especially in the global world. It can only lead to terrorism and hatred." And I quote that because it is a massive misconception of partially of certain areas of the world due to actions of some people. But in culture in general, think about it. How many different people groups are judged based on a few people or a few individuals throughout the culture? You see, the conflict sometimes can arise because of the misconceptions labeled on the groups of people. Another thing I want you to keep in mind, and you can use this in your extra time, will be the positives and negatives of cultural independence. In other words, how is Western world moving around, and how are we depending on it, and at what cost? One thing that keeps in mind is I keep thinking, at what cost are we moving forward? Hopefully you kind of gained extra knowledge, and then ultimately the last thing is cultural influence and morality. Hopefully you'll watch the live CC sessions to get a little bit more knowledge into all of these things, and stay tuned for your next video.